Hi everybody, and welcome to Crossing the Chasm, Moving Chiropractic from Pain to Brain. This is Dr. Richard Barwell, and we're going to go through a very quick webinar today. Normally this is part of a series of talks that I do, and this is sort of the opening, but we've sort of crowded in some advanced information so to give you a taste of what this is all about. This is going to be a very, very exciting webinar. There is some huge breaking news that we'll get to partway through the seminar that pertains to all of chiropractic worldwide, something that has happened in the last week that is going to change this profession forever. So, and I'm very excited to be able to be talking about it within this context of chiropractic and neurologically based chiropractic, the future of this profession. So let's see what we can do about this. We're going to talk about chiropractic, subluxation, and looking at what's going on in the world of neuroscience and do an update as it relates to chiropractic. Now, what is so important about this is it's not just relating to chiropractic in a general term. This is relating to what's going to happen in your practice and how you can take your practice to a whole new level of experience. You know, I've been around for a long time, and I've been through a lot of the practice management programs. There's just some excellent programs that are out there, but I'll tell you that what we're talking about today isn't about practice management. It's about the concepts of who we are and what we do at a whole new level that opens up a new world for this profession. And it's just a really exciting time to be involved with this. So here's where we start, and this is part of our challenge today. And the first thing I want to do in this talk is sort of take a look at where we are today and why this profession is stuck. And it's not only stuck just from non-growth, it's also stuck in a general concept of who we are from the doctor's point of view. And when you talk to your patients in your office, you're talking about chiropractic in the centuries before. It started in 1895, and guess what? We're still defining chiropractic in that mode, where the rest of the health professions have already moved on. What we have here is the definition that was created by the presidents of the Chiropractic College, and they wanted to come up with a definition of subluxation. And because they're all raised and educated through the basic concepts of chiropractic from the very beginning, from D.D. and B.J. Palmer, more D.D. than B.J., they think in that mode, and we think how we're taught. And in doing so, it keeps us in that locked in that concept, or thinking inside that box of chiropractic being structural based. So here's what they came up with. Subluxation is a complex of functional and or structural and or pathological articular changes that compromise neural integrity and may influence organ system function and general health. And this is the definition that is driving all of the education systems within our colleges. This is what the college presidents came up with. And there is some huge glaring challenges within this definition to define this profession. It seemed like such a good idea at the beginning. The problem is it just didn't end well, and we're in the end of that definition of chiropractic, looking at it from that structural point of view and the bone on nerve and the vertebral subluxation as being chiropractic. And what's happened with that is because of the lack of evidence to support what we have been talking about for the 115 or 16 years, what we've had to do is we've had to restrict what we say and how we say it, because the rest of the scientific world is looking at us saying you need to be able to prove this, and you cannot prove it. And so our scope of practice is getting limited down and down and down to musculoskeletal problems and signs and symptom treatment. And that now it defines our chiropractic practice. Well, in doing so, it's restricted who we are and what we can bring to the table. Not only that, now there's other professions that have moved into this same realm, and so our market share is being reduced. You get a diminishing return on your investment as the market becomes saturated. And boy, are we ever seeing that, because we really got, at our peak, we were seeing about 15% of the population, and we're down now into that level of about 7% of the population. The only reason that there still seems to be some level of growth is because population is increasing. But our share should have gone up exponentially. It never did. It got to a point where it just passed 10%, where it's supposed to grow, and then started to back down again. So this great idea didn't hold water when we needed it to. So let's take a look at this historical perspective. And that's what it was. That definition I read before, that's really a very historical profession. Vertebral subluxation complex, thanks to Joe Felicia. And this is what it says. It says structural and or functional and or pathological articular changes lead to compromised neural integrity. When they talk about this, they're talking about nerve root irritation, which may affect other organ systems or health. The problem with this is that there is no proof about that nerve root irritation. Besides that, and more important than ever, it doesn't explain how the light touch techniques get their results, because their result levels are just as good as the manual adjusters. So there's something that's missing in there. Same with the instrument adjusters. And so it just doesn't explain when we have people getting those kind of results when they're not doing that bone-on-nerve removal, that it left a hole wide open in the explanation of who we were. What makes it even worse is the next step is when you put may affect in there, you really should, in fairness, put or may not affect. And that alone, just that, may affect organ system function and general health, or it may not, leaves us standing there looking like a bunch of fools in a chiropractic profession that we know we're getting the results, but we cannot explain who we are and what we do and why it works. And that's the problem with all of this. So let's take a look at this from a structural standpoint. Structural challenges. Tell me something. How would a gallon of soda knock a bone out of position? Because as we look at chiropractic being vertebral subluxation based, we'd have to take a look and say, wait a minute, even if that's the case, why did that happen? If the body's supposed to be self-maintaining and self-correcting, why did it allow a vertebral subluxation to develop? And how did that develop? Did it just appear magically? Did the subluxation fairy come along at night and hit you with their magic wand and give you a vertebral displacement? Or how does an emotional stressor create a vertebral misalignment? And is it really this thing of a subluxation, is vertebral subluxation, or is it a vertebral fixation? It's not denying that that's there. We know that there is a vertebral challenge going on. The question is, how did it get there, and what is it that we do that makes the difference? So the functional challenges. If it's functional changes, which is part of this definition, we need to be a little more specific about what we're addressing. Is it skeletal motion? Is it joint mechanics that we're talking about? Is it postural? I went to a college at a time when we were doing postural analysis, and that was the secret to chiropractic, was correcting bad posture. Or is it paraspinal muscle activity? Is that what we need to do, is just look at the paraspinal muscles and say, well, there you are, that's what it is? Are those the functional changes that define chiropractic? And we have to ask those questions. What about the pathological articular changes? Is it about pathological joint dysfunction? Is it segmental degeneration? Is it facet syndromes? Is it disc degeneration? I mean, all of these things, if that's it, if that's what chiropractic is, then we're going to be limited to just dealing with that. So all of a sudden you start to see that this definition that our great, wonderful leaders of our universities came up with are rather questionable at best into what it really says. It doesn't say much of anything. As a matter of fact, it leaves more questions than it does help. And so here we are, we're as a profession that really doesn't even know what's going on, why we do what we do, how it happens. And this is after all these years, and this is after all the money that's being spent in chiropractic research, which is minimal, I'll have to admit. But even with that, we're still not able to come up with any better answers than what we just saw. And that's not nearly good enough. So, talking with Dr. Bob Blanks, who is a neurobiologist, he is a professor emeritus out of Southern California University. He teaches at the medical school and at University of Miami. He is a very interesting man. We've had many a discussion about chiropractic and neurology and so on, and this is what we came up with. He said, well, first of all, when we're talking about this, we need to look at this from a standpoint of, ideally, we need to have neural integrity. The nervous system needs to be functioning as a complete unit in balance. So that means we need to have optimal cell-to-cell communication. There needs to be ideal neuroplasticity, and that's the ability to adapt and respond to its environment. And if you have that, you're going to have a general health and well-being state. That's what's going to keep you healthy. Okay. Neural integrity, we need to look at this a little closer. Optimal cell-to-cell communication. And we keep talking in chiropractic circles about innate intelligence. But we need to understand innate intelligence at a little better level. We have cellular innate. In other words, every cell has an inborn intelligence. It knows what it's going to do. A liver cell knows that it's not a pancreatic cell and has different functions, or a kidney cell, or a heart cell. They have inborn intelligence at the cellular level. Each organ has an intelligence, an innate intelligence. The organ knows what it needs to do as a group of cells within this system. And then we have systems, the digestive system and respiratory system, that's going to involve various organs and different types of cells, and those systems have to work in integrity with the other systems of the body as well, and they need to be controlled by a central organizing authority, and that's the brain. That's the central nervous system's role. Matter of fact, all the parts of the body are merely there to serve the central organizing authority. The brain is the master, and it puts up with all the rest of this stuff and dedicates itself to keeping all of those things in balance so that it may continue. And if you think that the brain doesn't understand its priority level within the body, then you're mistaken, because it definitely knows it's the most important thing. It will sacrifice other parts of the body to save itself. You know, if somebody swings a sword at you, you're going to put your hand up knowing full well you're going to lose your hand, but the brain says, don't care, can live without a hand, can't live out without me. And so it's the master. The next thing is, we need to look at ideal neuroplasticity, the ability to adapt and respond to an environment. And this is critical. This is all about survival value. And this business of being able to sense what's going on within our environment, we go through an alert response mechanism. That's a mechanism that's built in to warn us that there may be something wrong. It's a gut feeling, and we will pause and look. And deer do this all the time in the fields. They pause and they look to see if they've sensed something's not right. If they see it's not right, they go into full flight response and run away or go into battle. But if it's okay with this fight-flight response, they'll just go back to a normal response level for that whatever activity they're doing. And then there's the ability to recover from fight-flight. So these are the ideal neuroplasticities we need to look at. We've got to have good sensory input. We've got to allow our bodies to be aware of what's going on in the environment and be able to determine whether it's dangerous or not. If it's dangerous, to go into the fight-flight response, and then to be able to recover within 90 seconds back to normal. Those are the ideal things we need to have. These are the people that are coming in to see you in your office. The reason that they're in trouble is because they've got some problems in these areas. And it's gone to the point where they've started to develop symptoms. You can talk about them and treat them for their symptoms, which is the practice of medicine, in your office, or you can try to establish what's going on with their nervous systems and why they're in trouble and help them get their nervous systems back in function. That's the foundations for chiropractic, not treating signs and symptoms, which is the practice of medicine. But we've lost our way. So let's take a look at what's next thing here about that central organizing authority. We can look at what's going on in the cortical area, the EEG brainwave patterns. That's the storage area for your experiences and your memories that help you to respond appropriately in the future. For instance, you learned how to not to touch a hot pot because it hurt and burned your hand. And so that memory gets stored in the cortex so that the next time you get into that situation where you can feel some heat being radiated, you're going to respond appropriately and not grab hold of it. The EEG, the brainwave, the cortex, communicates with the limbic system, which runs your autonomic nervous system. And those of you that are on the call that are doctors have studied the sympathetic, parasympathetic balances in the body, what they do. You may be a little rusty about this because you didn't think you'd ever have to use that in chiropractic because you were taught just to move a bone. But now you find out that, whoa, that was really important stuff. And so we're going to be able to take all of this information and put it into practice, into your office, with your patients very simply, and they get it. Now, you don't go to the details I'm going through here talking to you. You're the doctor. You have a whole different background, and this is a different ballpark for you than it is for your patients. We teach you how to do this with patients. It's so simple. But I want you to get the big picture of chiropractic today. So now I'm going to drop a bomb on you. We've come this far taking a look at where we are and why we've got some problems, and I've already opened up some possibilities in your brain for you to take a look at who you are and what you bring to this table. But I'm going to really drop the bomb right here and show you something that is just absolutely amazing. Every time I looked at this thing, my heart just leaps because you notice that the driver of this car is nowhere near. I imagine he is probably never coming back to work again. Let's talk about neural integrity, and this is again from the talks with Dr. Bob Blanks, the neurobiologist. We know what this is, but here's the thing here. Compromised neural integrity, CNI, is subluxation. The subluxation is within the nervous system. It's not the vertebral subluxation. That's a symptom of an abnormal neurological function. And that's what BJ said a long time ago. It's created by emotional, chemical, structural, and other stressors. So compromised neural integrity leads to maladaptive behavior, inappropriate structural activity. And that structure doesn't just mean posture. It means organ or cellular systems. The structure within the cell becomes inappropriate in its responses, and now the cell starts to break down because we've lost neural integrity that is the central organizing authority to make sure everything stays in balance and operating in harmonies. So suboptimal health, diminished quality of life, and followed by disease. That's the key here. That's what we're looking at. So compromised neural integrity, reduced neuroplasticity, you lose your ability to adapt and respond correctly, you have inappropriate actions going on, you get distorted cell-to-cell communication, that's subluxation. So the CNS malfunction or message distortion, that neurological message distortion, sets up abnormal neurological patterns which distort the active system or the muscles, which affects system activity. So now we get cellular disruption, organ function, and joint relationships. You get abnormal muscle patterns going on because of an abnormal neurological message going out. That's going to create vertebral subluxations, or what I would really refer to them as vertebral fixations. Because now we have this abnormal muscle activity from left to right, it's going to create distortions. But that muscle activity, if it's big enough to affect what's going on in those big muscles of the spine, what's it doing to the small muscles in the intestinal tract? What's it doing throughout the rest of the body? Because every single action in the body happens because of muscle activity. And if it's that badly distorted that it's affecting the big muscles, what's it doing to the tiny muscles that are in charge of excretion? And you start to wonder why hormone balances go off. All sorts of levels need to be considered with compromised neural integrity. So here's sort of stepping back a bit. Riekman and Felicia, years and years ago in the late 70s or early 70s, came up with their program in Renaissance where they talked about kinesiopathology, neuropathophysiology, myopathology, histopathology, and spinal pathophysiology. And that's the model they came up with. And we all that were involved in this jumped on this because at least it gave us something to talk to. Well, kinesiopathology means abnormal motion that led to abnormal nerve function. And you can see there's the box showing back up again. It was structure governing function that they were thinking from because that's what they were taught. Well, a little bit later on, along came Kent, and he came up with dyskinesia, dyspanesis, and dysautonomia. So Gentempo and Kent came up with this. It sort of suited their model, but you'll see something. Dyskinesia means abnormal motion that leads to abnormal nerve function, which is dyskinesis. So really what you see is it's exactly the same thing. They're using different words. And they've managed to sort of remove a couple of these things here. But there's something major wrong with this thing. And if I click this, you'll see that if we truly believe that our primary function and our primary focus of chiropractic deals with the nervous system, then why are we talking about abnormal motion first? Because we looked at this thing that we were taught saying vertebral subluxations are the cause of everything. We didn't bother to ask what causes vertebral subluxation. So there's something majorly wrong with this whole concept in that it taught us the wrong thing around. And it was just sort of this. I mean, people were thinking within this structure that they had been given, said, Holy Great Mother of God, I've been cloned. And that's exactly what had happened. The thought was not there as to what was going on in reality with this. Punjabi said this. Punjabi is a medical researcher, and he said this. There's three systems of the body. There's the passive system. It's the bones and joints. They do nothing on their own. They provide for structure, attachment points, and potential for movement. That's where vertebral subluxation or dyskinesia takes place. That's where the abnormal motion takes place, kinesial pathology. And that's where we've been focused. The second part of it is the active system, and that's the muscles. And they provide the power for movement, and that includes moving the whole body. It includes excretion, respiration, circulation, elimination, cardiovascular work, you name it. It's all because of the active system. And that then relies on the muscle tightness or non-tightness, the passive muscles or the active muscle. And that's run by the autonomic nervous system. So if we get unbalancing going on in the muscles where they're not in their ideal tone, we have dysautonomia. And you notice they use the word called tone. And this goes back to D.D. Palmer talking about tonicity. And he was right, but unfortunately BJ didn't like tonicity, so he threw that out. And we lost something with it because it would have helped us an awful lot. The control system is the final system. It's the nervous system. It's the central organizing authority. It controls function, defense, recovery, healing, metabolism, and that's why we run into the neurological interference or dyskinesis. So here we are as a profession. We've been focused on the passive system for many, many, many years. We've been taking x-rays of bones and joints and calling it chiropractic. And a few years ago, they started looking at the active system with the SEMG, and they were saying this is chiropractic. But really, they were only looking at the secondary response. If you really, really want to be a neurologically based chiropractor, you have to look at the control system. You have to look at the central nervous system as to how it's functioning, because it's the one that creates the unbalance in the active system, which disturbs the passive system. So neurologically based chiropractic should look like this. You know, if I want to use those old terms, it should be neuropathophysiology first or dyskinesis first. And then neuropathophysiology would lead to a breakdown in cellular function, a breakdown in this case to muscle activity, which is going to be all controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So on this side, under dyskinesis, it would be dysautonomia, it would be second. And then finally, we get the abnormal motion, and then we get the breakdown in the spinal pathophysiology. It's just a new strategy for looking at what's been going on, and it has a much more sound explanation that makes sense to not only to us, finally, to be able to defend who we are as chiropractors, it makes sense to our patients, and it makes sense to the other health practitioners. They start to look at chiropractic saying, why didn't you tell us this before? Well, because we didn't understand what we needed to tell them. So the nervous system remains our primary focus of care. Only the strategy has changed. Instead of talking about bones and joints, we're now going to start talking about neurological function. And the neuroscience research that's gone on in the last 10 to 15 years has provided the information that we needed to really be able to understand really what subluxation and chiropractic adjustments did. So what did BJ say? You know, everybody wants to sort of get upset about me with it when I get talking about this, saying, well, you know, you're selling out chiropractic. Au contraire, in 1930, BJ said it was becoming obvious that we're much more at play than simply a bone in or a bone out, that there was something else going on. He said palpation, x-rays, taut and tender fibers, or contracted muscles, none of these locate a subluxation. They only locate misalignments. He said this like, what, 80 years ago? 80 years ago he made this statement, and nobody would listen to him. He said, I know what's going on. The subluxation is in the impulse. It's inside the nervous system. Something's gone wrong with the message. But people weren't listening because it was just too easy to rack them and stack them. Along came the medical doctors of Watmore and Coley in 1968, and they said this about dyskinesis. They said it's a reversible pathophysiological state of unnoticed, misdirected neurophysiological reactions to environmental events. In other words, we had reactions that were going on from our environment that were not correct. And they were chemical, emotional, or physical, or electromagnetic forces, but it had repercussions throughout the body. These unnoticed, misdirected reactions. He went on to say this: these errors in energy expenditure, and there's the nerve interference, and there's the subluxation. And this is in 1968 from some medical guys, produce functional disorders consisting of errors of motor output. So, gee, we got functional disorders, but the only way we can register them is if the motor system, the active system, is not working correctly, if it's doing inappropriate actions. But they're covert in nature. We're not even aware of them until it reaches a point where it's created so much damage that the body system has to say, we got a problem here, I'm going to give you a symptom. And this comes from the cortex, which unbalances the autonomic nervous system function. That's dyskinesis. And that truly is a great window into understanding what chiropractic is all about. So dyskinesis, the phenomenon of subluxation, and we're talking about now neurological subluxation, not the physical manifestation of it, not the vertebral subluxation. You've got to get past that. The phenomenon of subluxation distorts your perception of the world around you and compromises your ability to respond to it. And if I had my way, every chiropractic office would have this in their reception area on the wall in big bold letters, because that's why people are coming in to see you. Because their bodies are not working right, their nervous systems are not sending the right information, and the world around them has been compromised, and they cannot respond to it correctly, and because of that, they are going to become ill, and they're going to die because of it. It's that simple. The only reason that we die in this lifetime is because our body loses the ability to adapt to the environment. So this is an interesting little experiment. If you see this lady going back and forth, left to right, then you're using both hemispheres. If you only see her turning one direction, for instance, if she's going clockwise only, she's then you're using only your right hemisphere. If she's going counterclockwise, all the way around, then you're using your left hemisphere. You should be able to, ideally, move her back and forth so she just alternates back and forth. And that means you're able to shift from one hemisphere to the other. I can literally dial in whatever I want her to do. I can make her go around right, I can make her go around left, I can make her go back and forth, because I have the ability to shift my hemispheres. And I tell you, when you do this, it's amazing, because the world feels different when you're using your right hemisphere versus your left hemisphere. And your awareness is different. So this works with a lot of Carrick's work, where he's talking about hemisphericity, because if your brain is stuck in one hemisphere, you're only viewing the world through what that hemisphere represents. And we know that the left hemisphere deals with logic and the right hemisphere deals with more emotional. And so it's depending on how you are viewing the world and interpreting what's going on around you as to which hemisphere you're using. Now, you need to be using both hemispheres, so that means that corpus callosum in the middle that connects the two should be active and being able to dial in back and forth and back and forth. 1930, that continuing in that speech, BJ said this: the majority of chiropractors work with the concept that they're the all-important feature of adjusting subluxations. Adjusting in their minds meant pushing bones into adjusted positions. Are you ready for this? This is the second bombshell. I never had such a concept. So all the stuff that's being taught in all the chiropractic colleges around the world that are teaching that chiropractic is about joint play and moving vertebra and increasing joint activity, that's not the foundations of this profession. Never was. He said, I never had such a concept. He said, adjustments happened after my hands left the back of the patient, and basically the nervous system reset the bone into position. Because what it did was it reset itself, which allowed a change in the active system, which allowed a change then in the structure, the bones and the joints. This is what really got me going on this. On my 32 years of practice, I always was challenged with the concepts of vertebral subluxation, because nobody could ever tell me why the body would allow that to exist in the first place. Where did the vertebral subluxation come from? I wanted to know the etiology of vertebral subluxation. And I was told that that was not important. My job was just to find them and correct them, and the body would do the rest. And I said, that's not good enough. We need to understand. That's sort of like changing a tire on a car that keeps wearing out because the alignment's not right. You better fix the alignments. You better fix the shock absorber, whatever it needs to be fixed, because that's going to keep happening. So just to go in there and keep removing vertebral subluxation and watching the pattern come back, which we saw over and over and over again, the patterns always came back, wasn't good enough. I wanted to find out what was causing this. I ran across some extraordinary human beings in Colorado, Dr. Annette Long and her husband, Dr. Alva Byers. Both of them were psychologists. She was a clinical psychologist. He was a research psychologist with 25 years experience looking into EEG brainwave studies. And so we started to do some experiments. I suggested that the chiropractic adjustment altered brainwave function. Alva didn't quite believe me, but we did some tests and we found that there was something remarkable going on. So for the next 3 years, Dr. Long, Dr. Byers, and myself, wherever I went and put on one of the seminars, we did pre and post adjustment EEG studies. We saw amazing, amazing things. We had well over 100 of these done, showing the dramatic changes from a single chiropractic adjustment. We had a procedure, we had a protocol for doing this. I have the paper, it's been published. If you want to get it, you can get in touch with Dee Dee and she can supply you the paper. Just so you know, there's been a subsequent paper that showed that I was right with what we found. So we did this. Now, unfortunately, Dr. Byers had the computer and it got destroyed, but luckily he had managed to send me about four of the case studies, pre and post, before this happened. So we lost well over 90 of these pre and post studies, but I put the paper together with this 4-case study. Here's what we saw. We were using an old-time EEG at that time. This was a few years ago now. And it's sort of, I call this brainscaping because it looks like landscape. And what you see here is a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And across the bottom, you can see this 1 to 31. Those are frequencies of brain activity. Well, we know there's different frequencies in different active states of the brain. So what we see here is like the red area is beta activity. That's wide awake, alert, responsive. The fuchsia color there that's SMR, which has to do with posture, balance, muscle activity. It stands for sensory motor rhythm, but it also has to do with the ability of the brain to keep itself clear functioning. The green, now we're talking about alpha, which is conscious relaxation waves. And then the next one down, that purple, is theta, which is light sleep, or rapid eye movement. And then the dark blue is delta, or deep sleep. Your brain produces all of these frequencies all the time, but it depends on which state you're in for the majority of the frequencies. So somebody being wide awake and alert, we're going to see the majority of activity going on in beta. If they were asleep, we'd see the majority of activity going on in theta and delta. But you can see that there's this wave here for alpha. That's where the wave slows down and starts to change, and that's a conscious relaxation state. So both brains should look the same. they should have the same kind of activity. I say both brains because really we do have two brains. We've got a left brain and a right brain. They just work together. And they should be the same, and they should be looking with the same kind of peaks with, you know, ability to dial in alpha and so on. So that's we knew what we're looking for. And not everybody's brain is the same. This is one person's brain, left and right hemispheres, and this was another person. And we know that the person on the right side has a very, very highly active brain compared to somebody on the left side where that brain is not very active or very well organized at all. So we now have, there's already been established ideals and normals in these things because of the research that's been done by the psychologists over the past 40 to 50 years. So it's already well established. So let's take a look at this. Here's case study 1. This is somebody's brain. You saw that one before, but this is that person before an adjustment. We did the adjustment, adjusting no more than 2 segments. We used light touch, instrument, or manual. It rotated through. One person would get one patient to do the manual on. Next one through would get, they would get an instrument. TRT was being used. And the third one would be light touch techniques. And we did this, and then we waited 20 minutes, and then we did another EEG after, and this is what we saw. That's the same person. That's a massive amount of change in brainwave activity 20 minutes after the adjustment. Now, how significant is this? It was so significant that Dr. Byers, who'd done thousands of these things, said to us, listen, you need to understand, to get that kind of a change, I have to do between 50 and 200 sessions of neurofeedback training, not biofeedback, direct brain training to get those kind of results. You're getting them in a single adjustment, and 20 minutes later it's still there. It was astounding. It was humbling, let me tell you. Here's another one. This is someone, now you notice the left and right aren't the same, and you'll notice there's big gaps all over the place in here, and there's just, he didn't want to show this individual this because he said this person's got brain damage. And I happen to know this person very well. I've known this person all their life. And I know why they have brain damage, because his mother used to punch him out, knock him out when he was a kid, literally punch him out. And the kid developed epilepsy, and he used to come in to see me as a chiropractor, or when I was a chiropractor, and got his adjustments. We got the epilepsy under control, and he's a chiropractor today. And I want you to take a look at why he likes giving adjustments. This is his after. Now you can see there's still problems, but look at the massive change before and after. Docs, you need to understand, every time that you give a person an adjustment, you have the ability to do this to their brain function. Now, we all know that not every adjustment is a good adjustment. And for doctors that want to argue that, all I have to do is remind you what it was like when you were a student at chiropractic college. There's such a thing as a bad adjustment. Well, wouldn't it be nice for you to have the ability to determine what would be an appropriate adjustment for your patient based on their state of their neurology? Today you can do that, and that's what this is all about. Today we can support all of this, and we make sense to the rest of the professions. Look at this one. Lots of activity, not well organized, just sort of scattered all over the place. And after the adjustment, much higher levels of organization. This person is relating much better. They still have some gaps. This person needs some work too. But at least we've got that brain working much better, and they're going to adapt to their environment better. This is me getting an adjustment. And what you see is the different colors, the red and the pink, that's left and right hemisphere. The green and yellow is, the red and pink is beta activity, wide awake, alert, fight, flight responses. The yellow and the green is alpha, that's conscious relaxation, that's a healing mode. There's no healing available in beta. Beta is fight, flight, lots of adrenaline and cortisol, but not so in alpha. And then the purples are theta. And I lay down to get a KL adjustment at A, and at C, he gave me the adjustment. And you can see what happened. Both hemispheres linked into alpha, a healing mode, and went off the top of the scale. Both hemispheres dropped beta right to the bottom, and thetas went up. So I was in a beautiful, after this adjustment, I got up off the table, and one of those life-giving adjustments where everything was brighter, the world was at peace. I would have been the perfect hippie, because it was like far out, man. I was just in beautiful, relaxed mode. It was like a meditative state with all my flight to the bottom and my thetas, which is light sleep, in the middle. And I was just in la la land. It was beautiful. And I thank the doctor every time I show this. Now, here's something else that's come along, the law of hormesis. The law of hormesis is a physiological law that's been tested and tested recently by Duke. And here's what it says. Strong stimulation stops physiological response. The higher the force, the higher the stimulation. That's like manual adjustment, upper cervical work, cranial nerves, or TMJ work. You've got to be careful with this. Or if you're doing network and you really do a lot of work on that individual, any kind of neurological input that you do, you've got to temper with how much that patient needs. If you have somebody that comes in with an exhausted nervous system and they can't take much, and you rack them and stack them, move everything you possibly can, you literally fry that nervous system. That's too much stimulation. It can't handle it. And you're going to do more damage than you do good. So we need to know this. We need to take a look then. Moderate stimulation inhibits a physiological response. So instrument adjusting, TRT, activator, KST. KST can be powerful too. It belongs up top as well because you can put a lot of stimulation in there if you want. I mean, you can be doing, and I've watched guys just do too much with people. And sometimes you really have to ask them if that's enough. And if they say that's enough, and you get the occipital drop when it says, leave me alone, leave them alone. It's telling you I've got enough to process right now. Light stimulation encourages physical responses, light touch, network, best, access, and again, KST. So just know that if you have somebody that's coming in that's antalgic, you may need to get their nervous system's attention. You may need to do some strong stimulation to stop that pattern that's in place. But once you've got its attention and you see it stopped, don't keep using strong stimulation. Don't just rack them and stack them like you did the last time. What you want to do is back off and do lighter, do less, or change your frequency. And so we can take a look at this now. We can start to determine care plans based on frequency, duration, and intensity of the care. In other words, how much input you're putting into that central nervous system, because now you have neurological information to be able to judge that on. We're talking about stresses. We're talking about how your body responds to stress in its life, and if you're going to add to the stress or you're going to reduce the stress to that nervous system. So you need to understand a little bit about stress pathways. There's the hypothalamic pituitary medulla, that's the HPA axis, sympathetic adrenal medulla, SNS axis, or the vagus nerve, the peripheral nerve system. These are all stress pathways, and you can see how they work. Now, I know you've seen this thing before over here on the left-hand side with the brain and the spinal cord, but you'll notice that what they're emphasizing is the sympathetic ganglionated chain and its relationship and how they're all sort of wired together as the defense mechanisms to help you deal with stress. And you can see the areas that they deal with. They deal with the spleen and the liver and the pancreas. They deal with the adrenal glands, heart, respiration, thymus. All of these things are important. And in the past 20 years, psychoneuroimmunology has really been able to come to the fore because they've been able to demonstrate how the stress in the environment affects the neurological responses. So I want to show you what happens here. These are all slides from Dr. Blanks' presentation. I have his permission to use them. And here's when I was laughing when he was showing this thing. Here's a guy teaching this at medical school. He talks about the innate immune system. See, he says nervous system, endocrine system, immune system, and the immune system has the natural or innate, inborn intelligence, and it has an adaptive required or acquired immune system. And then they go over here to list the actual components of the innate immune system, and they're all listed there. They don't just say innate healed it. They said these are the active ingredients or the active components that are involved in that inborn intelligence within the immune system. They're doing a better job than we did. What you need to look at here is the adaptive or acquired. And if you look, it says interleukin 12 and 1-2 and interleukin 4, and how that controls things called Th1 and Th2. Those are helper cells. Th1, Th2 are stem cells that grow into immune system cells. Okay? And what happens is this cytokines that determine which one gets designed, whether it's Th1 or Th2. And what happens is stress throws off the cytokine production, and therefore it throws off the helper cell production. And why is this so important? Th1 is cellular immunity. Okay? It's the ability of the cell to heal itself. And Th2 is humoral immunity. It's the overall body immune system to be able to work together. And what happens is we get a reduction in Th1 and an increase in Th2 helper cells when we get under stress. I want you to watch. Now you follow that. Th1 reduction, Th2 increase. He put up this slide, and he was talking about CNS injury-induced immune deficiency syndrome. So they were looking at people that have had major brain injuries, and they saw that over a period of time that they had a immune deficiency syndrome develop. In other words, their immune system didn't work properly because of the damage to the nervous system. So here's what it was. It affected the release of immune modulators, which affected those SNS, HPA, and PNS axis, and it started to produce adrenaline and cortisol. And how that affected the immune system, the innate immune system components, was this. Phagocytes or neutrophils were less, natural killer cells were less, T1 helper cells were less, Th2 helper cells were increased, macrophages were less. Everything went down except the Th2 helper cells. And here's the end column of this. The Th1s were reduced, cellular immunity. There is a side effect that happens with this. Th2 increases, there's a side effect. The side effect on Th2 increase is multiple chemical sensitivities, increase in things such as asthma and allergic reactions. And right now, that's across the board. Everybody's got this. Th1 reduces the ability of the cell to defend itself, and what happens with that is it starts to break down, and the cells mutate, and they start to become cancerous. This is the foundation for cancer. Immunodepression, breakdown in immunological barriers, and affects the lungs and intestines. Guess where cancer happens the most? And now we start to get feedback into the system, and it just continues to get worse. But here's the important thing about this. When I talked to him about this, we were looking at this, I said, so Dr. Blanks, are you talking about just strictly a major trauma like going to a windshield for brain injury? Or what if the brain is not functioning ideally over 10 to 15 or 20 years? And there was dead silence on the other end of the line when I was talking with him. And he said, you're talking about the compromised neural integrity, the subluxation. I said, exactly. He said, oh my God. That's chiropractic. That's why chiropractic works. Now, we don't treat cancer, but what we do, no one else can do. We help the nervous system get back into balance and function correctly and adapt to its environment correctly by correcting compromised neural integrity. We allow it to reestablish itself to a stronger base. That, in turn, allows these things to all act better. You need to view who you are when you walk into your office. You need to have total respect for chiropractic and your adjustment. I mean, really, you do not adjust people on pool sides anymore. You do this in your office and you treat it with due respect. It's the most powerful healing method there is. How can we measure whether our nervous system is intact or not? Very simply, these are the neurophysiological activity measurements that have been there forever. We know what the ideals are, and we can tell whether they're in balance or out of balance to tell whether your nervous system is functioning right or not. We can look at sweat glands. We can look at thermal activity in the hands or paraspinals. We can look at muscle activity, whether it's static or dynamic. Dynamic is always much better. Heart rate. We can look at EKGs. We can look at just basic heart rate using photoplasmography. We can look at respiration rate. We can look at heart rate variability and see what's going on there. We can look at brainwave activity and see EEGs and find out what's going on. We can look at multiple areas. We can look at single areas. We can look at double areas. We can move it around on the skull and see what's going on in different areas of the brain. And then we can run them through a stress test that has built-in stress responses, 3 different types of stressors that are most common in our life: cognitive, emotional, and physical. And we can see what happens when we stress them in each of those and whether or not they can recover within 90 seconds and find out whether or not their nervous systems are functioning in ideal ranges or not. This isn't new. This is B.J. Palmer with his electroencephaloneuromantiphograph. That's exactly what he was trying to do. He just didn't have a computer. And he was trying to figure out what was going on with that nervous impulse and where it was breaking down and how it was showing up. He was so far ahead of his time that people didn't understand what he was even talking about. The man was an absolute genius. This is what our stress response today looks like. He would give his eye teeth for this. And this is the same person before and after a care period. You can see the dates up at the top there. We're looking here at 3 months. And you can see that on the EEG up here, you can see that the bar where the red bars are, those ones on the left and ones on the right are almost the same height. That shouldn't be like that. It should look like it looks after the care. That's the ideal ratio right there where the green bar is. The heart rate variability, this person showed signs of heart damage. And post 3 months later, it was gone. His heart rate went from 102 to 82. His skin conductance went from 4.5 to 2, and 1.5 is ideal. Temperature went from 99 to 97, down into the normal ranges. Respiration went from 18 down to 17 breaths a minute. There's still some work that needs to be done with this individual. You can see some of the major shifts. And now you can show people this, that chiropractic's changing their nervous system responses, not whether or not their pain's gone. So refocusing the profession. Here's the thing I want you to know, that there is a practice consciousness in your practice that governs your limits and how far your practice will grow. And it has to do with your understanding and your ability to convey that understanding to the patients for them to get the message. And this isn't a criticism of people that want to practice in pain relief practices. There's some people that just want to do that. That's fine. But here's the thing. If you're only working with pain relief, you're going to have a huge number of new patients. Because as the pain disappears after 6.5 to 8 visits, they're gone. Or they want to be gone. And so it's a real difficult keeping them onto their schedule once their pain is gone. Most of them have left the office, and now you have to either chase them down or go and find somebody to replace them. And that's why we have the practice management programs out there that keep promising you 100 new patients a month. Or guys that are going to go out and do talks for you, bring in 100 patients, only 2 of them stay, and the rest of them took your time. That's when your PVA is between 1 to 35. We do a good job with that, but it's not the ideal practice. It's too stressful. Then we have the next level, the musculoskeletal level. And that's where there's something going on beyond pain relief. They stay under care in order to change things like posture, for instance. Or it may be cervical curves. Whatever it takes to change that musculoskeletal model. Generally, we find the PVAs are 35 to 50 in those. The next level, and this is all that I'm attempting to do. I have a dream for this chiropractic profession, and that's for us to move the average PVA in America from 12, that's where it is, to at least 50, because that means that the consciousness of the practices are that we're dealing with the nervous system, that the patients understand that our job is not to relieve their pain, not to straighten up their bad posture, but to actually get their nervous systems functioning better. And they will stay under care for that if we can demonstrate to them that's what we're doing. And that's what we need to do. So I'm just trying to get it to neurological of 50 to 80. Now, there is a wellness, but I'd like to use the term peak performance consciousness that goes beyond the neurological, where we start to work on absolute specific challenges that people weren't even aware they had. You start to see the PVAs in the 80 to 150. I've got to tell you, there are 3 more levels of practice consciousness above this. But they're so far beyond reach. It's like me sitting there with electroencephaloneuromantiphograph trying to tell people what they are when the average practice out there hasn't even exceeded pain relief PVAs of 35. Why are we dying in practice today? Because our average is only 12 visits and the patient is gone. And that means you've got to spend a bunch of money on advertising and marketing and a bunch of your time trying to convince people and sell them that they need to stay on beyond pain relief, but you've got no reason to show them why. Today you do have. So definitions. You need to get some new definitions in your head about who you are. Chiropractic, art, science, and philosophy, I know those are all critical, of locating and facilitating the reduction of interference to the neural-based allostatic responses of the body. In other words, we don't treat anything. All we do is we know how to make the body work better, make the nervous system work better by removing some interference to that nervous system, by putting a pattern interrupt into that bad pattern and allowing the body to reestablish better normals or better ideals. That's what chiropractic is. Now here's the exciting news, and this is the major breakthrough, and I'm so excited about this because it represents probably 20 years of my life. I've had a goal with this profession to move it, and this weekend the CCP guidelines, I'm vice president of the CCP guidelines, and I want to tell you about the CCP guidelines. They are the primary guidelines used worldwide to determine the scope of chiropractic practice. You understand this? That's what they're referred to say, what is chiropractic practice? It's the CCP guidelines. We are in the midst of doing the 4th edition. It won't be out for about another year. But in order to do this, there was a major shift that happened. And the major shift was, first we removed the term vertebral from subluxation through all the guidelines, and then we had to come up with a better definition than what has been offered of subluxation. 6 months of gnashing and wrangling and getting the points through. This is what was voted on last weekend for the CCP guidelines. Compromised neural integrity. Subluxation is a neurological imbalance or distortion in the body associated with adverse physiological responses or physical responses and or structural changes, which may become persistent and progressive. The most frequent site for chiropractic correction of subluxation is via the vertebral column. If you look at this, this changes the game in chiropractic. No longer are we restricted to looking at joint mechanics and vertebral subluxation and spines and backbones and back crackers and neck snappers. Now we become experts in neurophysiology. That's who we are. And this is the definition that allows us to do this. And it doesn't limit it to humans. It limits it to anything with the nervous system. Because what we're going to do is deal with that nervous system. And we say it may become persistent and progressive. For those that want to practice vertebral subluxation-based chiropractic, they're free to do so, but they need to know that they're dealing with the tertiary response and not the primary cause. We can't find fault with them if they want to do that, but we can sure offer the opportunity for everybody that wants to move on past that and start to understand this. We offer this. And we've already had some feedback coming in from one of our doctors was having a discussion with the doctor of a DO, medical doctor now, and he said, finally somebody has made sense to me as to what you guys do, and to be able to understand the etiology behind what you do has been so lacking, and it is such a powerful move on your part. Congratulations. We're going to be accepted at new levels because now we can explain it ourselves. What about an adjustment? We need to understand what an adjustment is. It's a chiropractic procedure. I will not let anybody else, and I will not use spinal manipulation. There's a difference, and the difference is intent. If you're doing spinal manipulation, your intent is for joint mechanics. If you're doing an adjustment, it's a chiropractic procedure whereby the consequence of that action, the adjustment, serves to continually modify further action within the nervous system with the intent of creating harmony within the body's systems. In other words, your adjustment, the intent of your adjustment is to improve neurological function. That's what makes it an adjustment over a spinal manipulation. What is NBC? Research-supported approach in which the central nervous system is the primary focus of chiropractic care, and all spinal mechanics, joint play, vertebral fixations, vertebral subluxation complex responses are secondary or tertiary in nature. And if you'll go back and look at that top, the primary focus of chiropractic care is the nervous system. Nothing has changed there. It's just the strategy has changed as to where we place the importance of the adjustment. He understood. And the more I have read about him and the more I have read about his research, the more respect I have for the man, the more I understand where he was going, and the more I understand his absolute frustration with the profession that literally threw him away. So refocusing this profession, we need to increase our survival value. That's what we do with chiropractic adjustments. We increase everybody's survival value, their ability to adapt to their environment. It's beyond the vertebral subluxation. And when we limited ourselves to looking at chiropractic from that, we limited who we were and what we could do for people. We need to understand function governs structure. I was taught structure governs function because it was in that box thinking of spinal distortion was chiropractic. No, it's the abnormal function that creates the abnormal structure. Now, does that structure then have feedback into the system? Absolutely. Once the structure's been distorted, that creates more feedback and it disrupts the function even more, and now we're onto the safety pin cycle. And who we are? We're functional neurologists, and I challenge you to do this. The next time that somebody asks you what it is that you do not say, I'm a chiropractor. I want you to answer the question saying, I'm a functional neurologist, because they will then have to ask, what is that? And you can tell them that you deal with directly with the nervous system, making sure that there's no interference with the nervous system, that it's functioning correctly, and you help change old bad patterns that are unhealthy to new healthy patterns. And they're going to say, I want some. I want some of that stuff. Where are you? But if you say I'm a chiropractor, they're going to tell you their back doesn't bother them now. So here's your choice, folks. You know, you can have this brain over here, or you can have this brain on chiropractic in your office. And this is a poster you can put up in your office telling everybody exactly what you do and why you do it. So welcome to Neurologically Based Chiropractic, and we'll see if there's anybody that has any questions or anything that they would like to say. Dr. Applin, I think you may be on.
Actually, he just chimed out. He put in there that he had to go, but
I'm sorry.
He said great job. We do have.
Is Dr. Markham on?
Yes, Dr. Markham is on.
I want to get him on because this man, he's something special.
Dr. Markham?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I can sure hear you, Dr. Markham, and I want to tell you, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you did over the last 6 months in coming up with that incredible definition. That group was just remarkable.
I think the team did a great job. I was proud to be a part of it. I thought we really wrestled with some of the challenges that we all face relative to the orthodoxy that we were taught versus what we intuitively knew was right. And we got back to the original readings, and we saw where DD and BJ had tried to take us, but the difficulty of grappling with those big questions without the proper science led us to rely simply on simple mechanics to explain what we did. And as we became more aware of the current neuroscience, and we realized, well, everything is in the literature now, and we can begin to build on that foundation and get back to our roots, really. The way I look at it is we're getting back to our roots, and we're getting off the path, the sideshow that we were on for a while.
No kidding. Now, you're at Life?
Yes, I work at Life. I handle the Level 3 clinics preceptor program.
And I know that you have the NeuroInfiniti there, and
yes,
I hope
we do have it now.
Being used.
Yes, we have the faculty and students getting trained up to begin to operate with this, but it's one of the great tools that's come around. I mean, this is going to become the standard, just like doctors years ago all wanted to get the NCM or some version of that instrument because it was considered to be the window into the nervous system. We actually have a real validated, verified window in, and that's where the NeuroInfiniti really shines.
It's super, and I would like to congratulate Dr. Riekman and all of Life for the incredible transformation that they've done, and I know that that whole college is moving towards that functional neurologist understanding for their students.
Not only is the college moving towards it at light speed, but Dr. Riekman has invited Dr. Carrick to establish a Carrick Institute neurology clinic on campus. And so as part of the university, we now have a Carrick functional neurology clinic, which is not only using his procedures, but some of the tools that he's introducing to the profession to manage nervous system outcomes. And this has become a major item on campus. So we've had major high-profile sports figures that people would recognize. I won't mention Sidney Crosby or Peyton Manning by name because they're too big. But those are the folks that are actually showing up on our campus to get treated at the neurology clinic to deal with some of their neurological issues. And what this does is just gives everybody kind of a tweak with their head and say, why would they go to a chiropractor? Well, it's not because their bones are out of place. It's because their nervous system wasn't functioning properly, and the chiropractor was the one who knew how to help them.
And it's been just such an exciting transformation watching this happen, and I know that this neurologically based chiropractic concept is starting to sweep around the globe, and we're getting chiropractors that are starting to wake up right, left, and center, and with more people calling us every day about this, and that the NI unit has just been absolutely part of that. It's been amazing watching what's happening to the practices. I think we have Dr. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was going to say your comments earlier about the what's happening to practices. I used to be a practice coach, and I can tell you when I was coaching how difficult it was to get new practices up to speed when the new practice was based on the old model. But when you have practices that are based on the model you're talking about, game on. It's a whole different world.
Absolutely. And that's is Dr. Dorn on, Didi?
He is.
Maybe Dr. Dorn would just like to comment on that.
Dr. Dorn? I think he might have headset problems.
I can hear the computer talking.
Yeah, I think he typed in last time. But I would like to unmute, if I might, Dr. Kyle Gullidge. Dr. Gullidge, are you there? Do you have a microphone? He basically typed in a great comment, so I will read it to you. Said, a lot of practice management folks I've worked with seem to be great talkers and salesmen. I'm more of a clinician and don't like spending time working on sales techniques. This seems to lessen the need for this. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing about this and that's one of the things that I learned. I ran my own practice systems program for 10 years based on the neurophysiology while I was busy developing this. We understood that nervous system was our primary focus, but we hadn't completed the development of the instrument at this point. So there was always some sales levels that was involved. But what happened was, as you were able to explain this, especially from a neurological foundation, people got it, and then when you could show them where their system was in balance or out of balance, and you gave them the choice of what they wanted to do about it, and they became enrolled, they made the decision to go on, you don't sell anymore. The patient makes their own decision. And when they do that, they enroll at a higher level, and that's why you get compliance with people on a higher level, because they've made the decision. They just didn't buy what you were saying. They saw it, they said, no, I want this. And so it makes it so much easier for people to play in their own health game. That's why I suggested that somewhere down the line, the minute that they move from a patient, which is somebody who comes in with a problem and wants to make their problem yours, to you start to handle that, and then you give them the choice of both saying, you need to play the role into helping improve this, they become practice members, which means that they have equity in their own challenges, and that they take the responsibility, and therefore their compliance is much better. And it's just amazing how that works. Much easier. Is Dr. Jensen on?
He is not.
Because he just told a story about having some people in, and that just absolutely makes it so simple to do this. That he's noticed a huge change in his ability to communicate and have people get the picture.
Yeah, he actually put that comment, Dr. Barwell, on our Facebook page, and I think a lot of people that are on the webinar, or those who aren't, can have easy access by looking us up on Facebook and see the doctor's comments, because there are testimonials there on a daily basis that just, talk about how easy it is for the patients to finally understand and get what chiropractic is and why that is where they need to be going for their health. It's just so cool.
So my suggestion to all of you that are on today is don't wait. Don't wait for the guy down the street to get the NeuroInfiniti. Get it, be the leader in your community, because this is the future of the entire profession. This isn't just something that is, a flash in the pan. This is the way it's going to go, and you're going to have the best, most up-to-date equipment that there is to be able to do this, and it's so simple to operate. It really is. Any other comments?
Yes. Actually, more just saying thank you, great presentation, right on, great answers. Yeah.
Great, super. Well, we're waiting for all of you to jump on board with this, and so we can expand this and get this profession changed in a hurry before the other side does too much damage. All right. That being the end, we will end this webinar, and next week is the NBC call, I do believe.
Yes, next Tuesday, 1:30 to 2:30. The CEO tells us.
Part of our program. You don't have to have an NI to join into the NBC calls, where we go over some of the latest research and neurological connections with chiropractic, and give you those researches for you to hand out in your office. And we do reviews and talk a little bit about some practice management. And they happen every 2 weeks, and you can enroll in that. So just contact Dee Dee in regards to that.
Yep.
All right.
And also, just to let everybody know, I did record this teleclass today, or this webinar today. So if there are any of you that want to share it with a friend, feel free, and I will email you the link, and you can email it to them to watch.
And we do have a training coming up at the end of April in Atlanta for new NI owners. So don't, if you're going to get onto this thing, get onto it now, so we can get you up and running and using this in your office before you get to the training, so that by then you can really absorb the advanced stuff.
Yep. And Dr. Barwell, that question actually just came through. How long does it take to get one up and running once they place the order? So if you don't mind, I'll go over that for one quick second.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What happens is when you order the system, we immediately start you with receiving the training material. So you'll connect with me through Skype, and we'll start sending you interpretation manuals, webinars, things you can watch, so that while you're waiting on the 7 to 10 days usually of the delivery of the machine, you're starting to learn the interpretation and all that beforehand. We also work with you on getting your marketing materials ready during that time, so that you can pick and choose what you want to use, and we will help you customize your office logo and information on those. Then through getting started PowerPoint and Skype and webcam, we can have you and your staff usually scanning within an hour of receiving the machine. It just depends on how motivated you are to get up and running. And then once you've gone through that, you've done your first scans, you send those to Dr. Barwell, and he goes over and starts with the one-on-one interpretation with you. So we really get all of this stuff done very quickly for you to get you up and running with the SRE, so that when you get to the training class, the 3-day, we're not sitting there doing basic installation and scan technique. We're basically going right to the fruit and nuts of it all, and just really getting in what does it mean, how do I apply it, and how do I move it to the next level. Okay, are there any more questions? Doc, that sounds like it. So if you will sign off.
Great. Thanks, everybody.